We have always worked by contamination, contaminating different disciplines, of course, of design, but also contaminating with art and different ways of creation, because we believe that the project needs to have an ambiguous position between knowledge and imagination, and between perception and understanding. The contamination is actually leading us to investigate different ways to know reality. And this is, of course, needs a very specific methodology, because you can study and build your model for context, but there is a moment when you walk a site. And this is still very human. You have to have your impression, you experience something that is your environment. Again, the duality that we have been talking about this morning is very true for designers. There is a kind of distance in between yourself and the context that you are exploring when you are starting on a project. But this mental synthesis that generates the project remain a product of an alchemy of, let's say, sentiments, knowledge, of course, kind of feelings, self-arrogance, of course, somehow self-consciousness of the capability to create something, which is the result of the self-awareness that no computing machine could ever have. The point is that we need to build a real relationship, a direct relationship between a digital object that doesn't exist, but is capable to behave like a real thing in an actual context that you know very well. So this is the good way, in our view, to approach the issue of design, being real and coherent, but aligned with a purpose. And this is for us to be right. This is actually where the ethical parameter that I was talking about at the very beginning is somehow defined for every project. In order to do so, you need to align with your machines. I mean, you need your machines to align with yourself, which is actually what is happening. The interaction, the research that you go through in your different processes of design using AI is actually teaching your machine and telling your machine what you want to find at the end.
Architecture has always been a space where technology and design, they come together. So sometimes both vision pushes technology to move forward. At other times you see technological advancements open the door to new design possibilities. In the early years, obviously, the work of the practice was seen very experimental. So the vision was there and it was setting the groundwork for what happened next. But technology needed to catch up and was not ready yet. And it required a lot of experimentation, a back and forth process between the physical models, the paintings, the drawing board, eventually with the 3D software that resulted into the first completed project of the practice, which was the Vitra Fire Station. It was, of course, about the new tools, but more importantly, this new way of thinking and framework of thinking that allowed us to innovate at the intersection between design and fabrication, create a more seamless connection between the two of them. With every project, there's so many layers that need to come together for a project to be realized. And with a project of this complexity, of course, from the early sketches, close collaboration with the engineers, optimizing the structure, understanding of the geometries, the surfaces, the material, its properties, limitations, how that translates into how we panelize the surfaces. And of course, like in terms of like the construction side, the concrete structure, the assembly of the space frame, the weatherproofing system, which followed the 3x3 meter grid to ensure efficiency and ease of installation, the secondary steel and the rain screen. And last but not least is the technological aspect with the project, apart from what was integrated into the design process. One of the primary use cases of technology is to create a seamless experience for visitors and staff. And here we have smart meeting management systems, virtual concierge, but on the health and well-being side, a more important element is the environmental sensors throughout the building. Through them, we're learning from the preferences and occupancy patterns within the building to create a more comfortable and more efficient and more sustainable building. So really looking at a building like a living lab, which is constantly drawing on this data and becoming more efficient over time. We use analytic tools in understanding the user's experience within the different spaces. Through VR, we take advantage of it in our design process to navigate within the spaces, but also in how we present the projects to our clients. We have integrated tools using AI within the design software that allow us to look at updates live in live visualizations, and more with our clients. With the enhancement in AI, the expectation is to have high level of productivity and share information.
Originally, I come from Greece. And it's very easy actually to forget where you come from, and that the reality here in, let's say, Northern Europe is very different to the reality that people in South Europe experience, especially in a small country like the one I come from. And I'm going to tell you something which is not an exaggeration, really. So for countries like Greece, digitalization means turning something that is handwritten into a PDF file. Countries that are developed and they have the money and the capability and the capacity and the skills, we really need to listen and extend our arm and help these countries to keep up with our pace, because definitely some of them, many of them are lagging.
Picking up on a question that was raised this morning around the balance, or the human-machine interface, I suppose we could call it, the balance between the technology, the leverage of the power of what that brings us, and the human aspect. Emily, I was kind of super interested in how you sort of thought that, how we're progressing with that question, and where do we find the balance to make sure that the human interaction is leveraging the power of what technology brings and not the other way around?
Yeah, I think that's a process that's sort of ongoing, of finding, at what point is, and looking at technology, what are the pros and cons of it, and also looking at ourselves, at where are the pros and cons of where we add value, and being able to find that sort of intersection where both technology and humans can work together collaboratively to kind of come up with the sort of best solutions, and using both the, predictive potential of AI, for example, as one, and using it to augment what we do rather than necessarily just assuming what it is, and also realizing our own biases, both as humans, but also when do we trust computers, when do we trust certain technologies, or when do we not trust it, as well as looking at the technology itself as to why are we, what are the biases that are inbuilt in that. So I think that's been a theme that we've seen throughout today. And really, it is an ongoing process, I think, particularly as we see more of these things advancing, really looking both at ourselves and the technology to understand where the benefits are and how we use them appropriately.
A calculating machine doesn't have self-awareness. So the machine cannot understand what is good or not, which is the big issues on some of the big hallucination from deep learning. This is what we bring to the table, and the purpose, the meaning of what we are doing, and the ethical goal that we are pursuing is the line that will never be surpassed. So the machine is a tool. AI is an ancillary tool to what we are looking for. That will. You can keep this control only if you really build, again, a language that maintains the transparency, the human capability to understand what is happening in the calculation. That's why the language is so important. That's why the structure, the framework, and the ethical parameter that is deterministic, is not probabilistic, is not statistic has to be maintained, and at least in our disciplines. At least in our disciplines.
AI is definitely a tool. We're leading this process and we're integrating into the way we work, and with the ultimate goal of creating better architecture, better urban design, better products. But the process is led by us as the designers, and we really are implementing them as ways of achieving that better response.
We need to ask questions in which somehow we do have already the answer. This is the way to lead this. I mean, it's extremely relevant that a lot of problems, like the creation of microorganisms that can somehow interact with our body and resolve huge problems like cancer or stuff like that is very important. And this can be done only through this kind of technology, because without that you will need generation of experiments and trials and errors. This is the role of this kind of technology. So to compress time, to allow us to go through experimental processes faster. But the question needs to contain the answer.
Yeah, I think it's part of kind of augmenting our kind of process, and I agree some of it is around using it for that experimentation piece, but also I think the role of the designer is to kind of question the AI and actually be like, why have you come up with that conclusion, and get it to actually explain why, and then be able to push it in certain directions, say actually, but with our knowledge of the site or the human experience, to then be able to start to guide it in a way that only humans can, because of our inherent knowledge, our feelings, the self-awareness that we have. So I think it's about learning how to interact with it in a way that pushes it in the right direction. But yeah, definitely part of that experimentation, augmentation process.
But also, have you ever tried to ask whatever large language model a question which you don't have the domain knowledge of it? It gives you an answer which might be correct, but you don't know. So that's not the point. We still need people, like domain expert on that knowledge, because otherwise it's something that you can't understand.